Okay, so if you're watching this video, then you are probably on the KDISD Learn to Quilt class. In the class, hopefully you will have cut all of your rectangles from your fat quarters. You'll have cut 5 different fat quarters 1 through 5. Out of the 8 different fat quarters that you have, and we cut 7 2.5 by 4.5 rectangles out of each of those 5. So here I have fat quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first thing we're going to put together are the ladder units. So you've got 2 ladder units. One has 11 rectangles in it. The second one has only 5 rectangles in it. So the first ladder unit, which has the 11, it's going to have 2 rectangles from fat quarter 1, 2 from fat quarter 2, 2 from 3, 2 from 4, and then 3 from fat quarter 5. So those are going to go together into our first ladder unit. Our second ladder unit is going to have just 1 rectangle from each of the fat quarters. So we've got 5 of those and 11 of those. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sew those together. So I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to start sewing my fabrics together into pairs. Okay, I've started sewing these units together. So I've sewn them initially here. I've been sewing them into pairs, okay? And so you can see right now they're sort of just sewn in 2s. And then of course this last one I've sewn 3 together just because 11 is an odd number. So I did 2, 2, 2, 2, and then my last 3. And if we look at the way that these are each being pressed, you'll see on your instructions, it tells you if you're looking at it from the front, you're going to press your seams to the right, okay? So if we turn that around, you can see the seam allowance there, hopefully, and that is pressed towards the right, the entire seam allowance. So we're not pressing seams open here. We're always pressing our seam to the right, okay? So we've done that with all of these, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I am going to sew all of these together to make one 11 unit long piece. Okay, so I've sewn this entire unit together now, and you can see we started with fat quarter 5, then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the seams are pressed to the right, and you should find that once you've made this, it should measure 22.5 inches long. Okay, if it doesn't measure 22.5 inches, then you might need to adjust your seam allowance a little bit. So if it's longer than 22.5 inches, then probably your seam allowances are still just a little bit too small. If it's less than 22.5 inches, then maybe your seam allowances are a little bit too big. Now, one way to check is just like the test that we did in class. Because these are all 2.5 inch wide units, when you sew anyone that has got the seam sort of taken on either side, what you can do is measure. It should be exactly 2 inches wide. So that's another way that you can check, and you don't have to wait until they're all sewn together. You can get 3 together and just check the middle one, so that if you find that your seam allowance is a little bit out, you can adjust as you go. So that's our first one. Now what we need to do is we need to take those other 5 rectangles and sew those together to make the smaller ladder unit. Okay, so that is my second ladder unit done. I've pressed, in this case, all of my seam allowances to the left. So with the first one that we did, all the seams were pressed to the right. With this second one, all the seams are being pressed towards the left. And again, if you want to do your check, you can just check one of these inside ones to make sure it's exactly 2 inches. This one, it should measure 10.5 inches long. Okay, so that is the 2 ladder units, and next we're going to do the flying geese.